I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. The presentation, we have like 4 laptops up here. I actually had a backup laptop that failed. Their laptops failed. It was a whole thing, so thank you for your patience. Yeah, we figured it out. We got here. Now let's see if this thing holds up until the end. Hello, thank you so much for joining me. We're here. This is it. This is the final day of PAX 2025, and I can't thank you enough for spending a bit of that here with me today, talking about game preservation. More specifically, wait, I can get a job doing this for a living? I can, in fact. There are some gotchas, which I will be speaking to as well. But before I get into this, I do want to preface this presentation. A lot of us know game preservation to be reflecting on old things, reflecting on our things that we experienced growing up, things that predated us even, old consoles, old magazines, anything from our past. This is the fun side of the job. If you're actually doing it for a living, this stuff is a bit more dry than you think. And this presentation is focused primarily on the reality of it. What does it actually mean to be an archivist? And this presentation is more centered on archiving in the games industry, when you work for an employer as opposed to doing it as in a nonprofit, a museum, or something like that. So it will be dry. It's going to show what my job looks like, which is not as fun as you might think, but just want to give it a heads up. Now, before we dive into the heart of this, I want to know about you. I want to know why you're here and what interests you, and I want to know a bit about everyone in this room. And so I have a few questions that I want to kick us off with. Who here does game preservation? Sweet. You'll get a kick out of this then. Who here is a game developer? Sweet, awesome. Hello, my fellow peers. And lastly, and I mean really the most important question, you can forget the rest of the questions. Who here believes that the best Nintendo console ever produced was in fact the GameCube? Yes. And then one last kind of question as well. This is a bit of a special treat that I brought here. Who here is a fan of Helldivers?
Oh, yeah.
I have a treat for my Helldivers fans out there. It'll seem like it's not a big deal. You can come up afterwards and see this in person if you like. Again, it's a little token, a little wooden keychain. This is the keychain that the Arrowhead devs got. This is their personal developer keychains. And so on the front, it has the Arrowhead Studio symbol, and the back, it has a Helldiver symbol as well. Each of the members of staff got this as a token of their time on the project. It's not often that we get to see physical history that isn't related to what the consumer saw. There's a whole suite of history relating to games specific to the creation process, to the devs themselves, things like that. So if you're curious, again, it's not too much, but it's a little wooden token. Now, I think we actually can begin with, well, who am I? Why am I talking here? I learned all about you. I think it's about time you learn about me. So I'll give you a bit of a tour of my experience in games, how I got here, why I'm talking to you on the stage right now. I got started in games about almost 10 years ago. All right. Way back when I got started as a technical artist at FIFA, or at Electronic Arts, working on the FIFA franchise. I did the work relating to authoring tools and maintaining tools that took assets from Gen 4 consoles, Xbox One, PS4, and automatically converting them for use in the Gen 3 version of the game, which is Xbox 360 and PS3. We had a whole suite of tools that did this automatically because it took a lot of work to do it for a game that scale. Also, fun fact, total aside, did you know FIFA 17 was made with 2 different game engines? The one on the Gen 3 consoles was Ignite, the old engine. The one that was on the Gen 4 consoles was Frostbite. 2 different game engines, that's why the story mode wasn't in Gen 3. Fun fact. So I did that for a year, and eventually there was an opportunity with another team for doing the very first job I had for doing preservation engineering. And so I joined, and I was FIFA's sole archivist for a couple of years. And so I supported the project, I preserved all their work. And it was a really interesting experience, but it also showed me the world of build engineering. I really like build engineering, and I'll explain a bit about what that means in just a little bit. But I pursued build engineering after I left the company at a variety of small studios in Vancouver. I got to experience it from the ground up, see small games, know what it's like. Yes, some of you might have a comment about one of these games on this list. I understand. And so ultimately at the end of this journey, I was enjoying build engineering. It was a really cool time in my career. Then I got a phone call, and PlayStation Studios came knocking. And PlayStation Studios welcomed me aboard as a member of really one of their founding members of their IP preservation department. A team of 3 people. There's only 3 of us. There's not a whole lot of us doing this kind of work. And since 2022, I've had a chance to work on probably a game you've recognized before. Yeah, the list goes on. And I've got to contribute a little bit to each of these games, some games more than others. I have been called in to be a build engineer in some of these titles. But what I ultimately am at PlayStation Studios is a senior build engineer. What that really means is that as a member of the IP preservation team, I work with projects to preserve all that goes into them, but from a functional capacity. I go in, I figure out what all goes into that game, but also how do we make sure that we capture the functionality of it? So for instance, if I preserve God of War Ragnarok, I can guarantee through the process that we follow, we can produce new patches, new releases, new builds until the end of time. That's the work that I personally do. And so that's the work of a build engineer. It's all about the build process. But that's me, that's who I am, that's my entire journey. So, enough about me, enough about you. I think it's about time we talk about the real subject at hand, which is game preservation. But, like I mentioned earlier, there's some gotchas to this conversation. I don't want to mislead. I don't want to be like, y'all are gonna get jobs tomorrow, welcome aboard. There are some things to keep in mind about getting a job as a game preservationist, specifically in the industry. So let's talk about those things. First off, the reality of it, there's not a lot of us. Like I said, at PlayStation Studios, while there's many people doing archiving work, doing preservation specifically, there's only 3 of us right now. There are other groups in the industry that Microsoft has their own, Xbox has their own, Blizzard has their own. I can go on a tangent about each one who has a group, but they're small teams. And so you're not gonna be seeing these jobs postings every single day. When these positions are posted, you're probably not gonna hear about them. Did you know Microsoft was hiring for 10 Xbox preservationists about 3 months ago? No one knew because it wasn't publicized. And so if you really want to get a job in this space, you're going to have to work pretty hard to find it. That's just the nature of it. This is an asterisk, generally speaking. Usually you're going to want some sort of background in technology. You don't have to be a good programmer. I'm not a great programmer myself. If you know IT stuff, if you know how PowerShell works, great, that goes a long way. Depending on which space you're going into, you will need even more engineering experience. Just be realistic. If you can have these things in your toolkit, fantastic, it'll go a long way. Not required depending on which job you get. Not every studio even has a team. A lot of indie studios, like, think about it, you're employing individuals solely to do work on work that may return a profit. Not every group is going to pay for that. Realistically speaking, it doesn't always return an ROI. And so not every company will even have a group dedicated to this. There may be one individual who just does it for the love of the game. Just keep in mind, you may want, like, I would love to be a preservationist at NCSoft. I don't know if they have a group or not dedicated to this. Maybe they do, I don't know. And lastly, and this is something to be really considerate of, institutions, museums, nonprofits, they have paved the way for decades in this space. As an industry, some groups have been around for a while, but they've taken time to build up. My team, for example, we've only been around since 2022. We're a super new team. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good at this, but these guys are. They're the experts, and we look to them for advice. We may have the funding, but they have the experience. And so if you want to be on the bleeding edge, keep in mind we're still trying to catch up. But there's also other things to consider. The reality of working in the industry is not all glamorous. There are things, you'll probably know what I'm probably gonna say next. But let's look at what life is like working at a game company versus working at an institution, nonprofit, museum, etc. And right off the bat, the freedom to work on any project from any studio or publisher, you're not doing it at a game studio. At a game company, you are working on that game company's games. If you work at PlayStation Studios, for example, I work on a lot of companies' games throughout the portfolio, but if we didn't produce, or we didn't make it, or we don't have the legal right to the material, we're not touching it. And so if you want total freedom to do anything you want, I highly endorse working at a nonprofit, museum, institution, etc., because you will have that freedom. Full access to developer staff, IT backups, pre-existing archives, etc. Look, there's really no better place to have that access unless you work at the people who created it. Now, this is a bit of an asterisk as well. We also suck at keeping our stuff around. I'm not even gonna try to glamorize oh, we're really good at keeping backups. Well, I think in the news from this very convention, the director of Final Fantasy was like, we had to go and pirate our game to find it again. It's tactics, yeah. So I'm not even gonna try to lie. But generally speaking, you're going to have access to a lot more stuff than you would otherwise. It's generally speaking kept around somewhere, even if it's in disparate places. Business-oriented goals with a larger focus on maximizing ROI. It feels gross to say, but the reality is that's our entire job. We are paid to be here. We are paid to do a job, and we're paid to make the company money. That's the reality of it. And so at the end of the day, I may have infinite passion. I may want to preserve a game so badly, that's the reason I got the job. The business might look at that and go, we don't think we're gonna make any money, don't work on it. You can fight for it, you can argue your case. ROI comes first. You can often overlap passion in ROI, so don't think that it's you can never have fun doing the job. But if you're working at an institution, you're giving more liberty to work on what you want. And so keep that in mind about this kind of field. And lastly, my favorite topic, freedom to discuss day-to-day work, ongoing projects, successes, and failures. Not a chance. Don't even try. There's a reason why none of us ever talk about this subject. It's not that game preservation doesn't happen in the industry. It's sort of a misconception that is kind of being passed around lately that game companies just aren't doing it. We are. There's a lot to this subject, and you'll see it throughout this presentation. We do a lot of stuff. We just can't talk about it because of the way people might react. It goes beyond me. I'm not a PR person, but you might think, well, you're on the stage speaking to us right now, but that's not fair. It took years of convincing and working with PlayStation's PR department to be able to speak like this, to be able to speak on this stage. And so keep that in mind. If you join a company, you're probably not gonna be allowed to say much. But if you work in an institution though, you can say whatever you want. You can just have total fun with everybody online. You can totally tweet whatever you wanna do. That's great. Live your life however you wanna live it. If you work at a business, different rules apply. All right, so I just was totally negative the last 10 minutes. Let's actually switch to a more fun topic, actually introducing you to what I do. This whole segment is going to be from the lens of what I do at my job. What does PlayStation Studios do? Every company does it different, but this is how we do it. So what goes into game preservation in the industry specifically? There's a lot of different categories of our work. For example, sourcing and discovery. And all of these topics answer questions, because again, we're a business, we kind of have to do it for a reason. So where does it all live? Most game companies do not store the stuff in one place. They will store it under the couch, behind the curtains, in the trash bin. This is a humongous part of the job to find it all. Archiving and curation, what do we even do with it? Sure, cool, we have all the source code for a game, and that's not the end of the story. Just because you have source code is irrelevant. You need much more than that. What do you ultimately want to do with it in the end? Title technology expertise. How does it all work? We don't just put stuff in boxes and call it a day. We actually utilize it. We use these projects. We do things with them to understand how they all function. Because just because you have the file for something does not mean you can restore the project. That's not the same thing. Tool and infrastructure, what do we use? We are a department that exists to enhance and to utilize funding to preserve games better. Manual effort is not the name of the game anymore. And so how can you scale? How can you scale now? You're gonna see in a little bit how much data we're working with, and you're gonna see why this is a section. Engagement and planning, this is the fun stuff. When does it all happen? As games are coming in, as they're being produced, as they're sunset, as maybe remasters come in, how does all that happen in the right order, and so that we can capture the material correctly? And lastly, emulation and porting. Yes, this is very much a field of game preservation. Some companies do it. Where does it go next? What happens next? I will not be speaking to the subject because my team does not partake in it. I don't know anything about emulation. I am the worst person to ask. And I would be doing a disservice to those who do it by trying to lie to you and thinking that I am doing it. So unfortunately, I have no comments because I don't know how it works. But let's go through each of these topics and show you some of the things of how we approach these subjects. Starting with sourcing and discovery. Now, games are complex. Games have a lot of things to them, and it's not just source code, source art, and call it a day. That is what I mean when we say, what is game preservation? What goes into sourcing and discovery? This is what we call the asset categorization chart at work. This is our attempt to establish a foundation of the kind of material we're going to be asking for. Because if I walked up to you as a game developer and said, hey, give me your stuff, what are you going to say? Source code, title data, sure, that sounds good, right? No. What about your marketing supplies? What about some cool presentations? What about the prototypes? This list goes on and on and on. And so we kind of use this as a foundation to help us have a better, more effective conversation as to what we're actually going to be looking for. Yeah, feel free to take photos. This is our chart from work. It is ever expanding, and so yes, it is not exhaustive. Archiving and curation. You think that this is just like, you have that library scene from Bruce Almighty that just kind of goes on forever. No, it's just like this. This is like half our job. I know, it's very, very pretty. It's just folders. And so this is a screenshot of and I'll show the next one as well. This is a screenshot of what's called our staging vault. And so at work, we have what's called the PlayStation Studios Vault. This is where all of PlayStation's history lives. This is the one location it all lives in. At the top, this is some of our folder structures we use, tracking projects, whether they're still in active development, things we haven't gotten to yet, but we're starting to collect material for, things like that. In addition, part of the job as well is curation. How do you know what you're missing? How do you know what you have? We don't just have stuff. And so, for example, this is our Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart archive. We have, for a fact, every build ever produced that a consumer has seen. We do this for all of our games. If the public saw it, even if it's a sub-patch, we have a copy of it. That's the hard rule. And so we track these, and we do extreme due diligence, we do checksums, we do hash difference checking, we do all kinds of stuff to ensure for a fact that we have what the consumer saw. And so that's a part of the job. It's not glamorous, it's not pretty, it is dry, but it's necessary. But also, this is a picture of our Until Dawn archive document. We write one of these documents every time we work on a project. It details everything from stuff you can Google. We have a section called Overview or State of the Archive. This is our personal handwritten notes as archivists. What went into this? What is the tea of the subject? What is the drama that went on with the developer? All of these notes goes into this document because the preservation process should be preserved. And that's exactly what this document serves to be. And so if you like documentation, ooh, you're gonna find home here. But it's even more than that, because just because you have data does not mean it's even usable. For example, if I just said, hey guys, I have all these games in my library, but you can't look at them. Are you gonna believe me? Is that even valuable to anybody if I don't let anybody see it or have access to it? Of course not. Well, we have a whole thing just to solve this exact problem, even in companies. For example, the archives that we have, most PlayStation developers don't have access to them. Even if Hermen Hulst himself was like, hey man, can I get access to the Sly Cooper archive? No, you can't. Why do you want access to it? But that's a bad conversation to have because then who can do anything with it? We created a search engine. This is a super early prototype, by the way. We're talking really early prototype for a search engine. Anybody can log into it internally and you can look up anything you want of any file ever produced by PlayStation. It is, well, right now it's pretty early on, but it's intended to help hold billions of lines of information about every file ever produced. For example, if I want to look up Ratchet and just search the database, you have at this very moment 115 columns worth of interesting file metadata that you can search through. These are the builds in Ratchet & Clank Size Matters. You can search anything you want. You can search the producer name, and it's probably going to be in the database somewhere. This is what we want to provide to people because having access to information empowers people. And this is one of the things we have failed as an industry, is actually empowering people with the past. And so when you think about going into game preservation and you want to do archiving and curation, just because you have it, that's the first step. There are a lot more. All right, my side of the business. Tile technology expertise. Games are complex. As we know, There are so many game engines out there that are publicly available, like Unreal Engine, Unity, etc. There's also in proprietary engines and software. Trying to be a game preservationist means you will inevitably be a master, or at least a jack of all trades, in most of these software. Every one of the software here, I've had to learn. I've had to become good at, because a game used it in one way or another. This is only, other than Decima, the publicly available list. Double or triple this and you get the number of proprietary game engines that I've used. You are going to be really, really good at game engine technology, or sorry, just game technology in general. And so the more diverse your background, the better you are in this space. I mean, the ultimate goal is at the end of the day, when you learn this amount of software, you might as well just call yourself a fellow developer. And so, I think this is what you're striving for when you're trying to game preservation, is to be an expert in the game, second only to the creators themselves. Tools and infrastructure. All right. Usually when we talk about the subject, you're like, I have an array of hard drives, a couple terabytes in size, 10, 20, 30 terabytes. Wonderful. I think that's fantastic. When you work in an industry like our game studio, we're talking about much bigger numbers than that. So let's look at the world. Start with the world map. The way we organize our infrastructure at PlayStation Studios is we have what's called staging vaults in 2 locations in the world, one in Las Vegas in a data center and one in Liverpool, England. This is where all of our stuff goes as we work on it, as we figure it out, study it, collect it, things like that. Right now, our Las Vegas data center is 800 terabytes and almost 1 billion files in 2.5 years, or sorry, 3 years of work. That's probably less than 0.5% of PlayStation's history that we're still going through, we're still churning through. To us, drives, we're talking about hundreds and thousands of them. We're talking about server racks, data centers. This is the scale we work with. That's not including the other staging vault, which is much smaller at 150 and only 130 million files. But this problem grows beyond just simply being able to store it all. When you have companies all around the world giving data to us, putting it into the vault, we have folks in Japan sending it all the way back over the sea to their US vault. We don't have a Japan-based vault yet. You're talking about access control, permissions issues, making sure that the read and write speeds, things like that. Infrastructure becomes a hard question you have to solve because, look, do you think it's easy to run a 1 petabyte storage grid out of your house? I mean, no. This person, yeah. So think about your infrastructure, think about it early, and think about how to make it cheap, because even we have problems with this costing too much. But it's more than just our infrastructure, it's tooling. There are a lot of third-party tools out there. There's also proprietary ones we tend to write. We have a bit more privilege because we have the funding, we can pay for things. For example, this is a tool that I wrote. This is one of the tools. I'm hoping to open source it one day. It is a conversation I'm having with work, TBD. It's called MetaGen. MetaGen looks at a folder structure on a computer, walks through every single file in that folder structure, pulls all of the metadata from the file, and coalesces it all together in one ginormous file called a CSV file. If anyone's familiar with it, it looks like an Excel file. It's just columns and rows. And so if you have an archive of 1 million files, you have 1 million lines, each one being a file, each column being all of the information about that file. This means file name, file path, last modified date, etc., but also things like which version of the build was it? What is the codec used for the audio file? Things like that. I mentioned earlier, we have 115 unique fields of information that are currently being pulled by this tool. This is our way of automating what could be an incredibly manual effort. And so if you're in this space, this is what you can do. This is the kind of stuff we can get up to. This is the freedom we're allowed because, again, we have a bit of funding, which is really nice. Engagement and planning. All of us tend to think this is going on stages like this, and this is talking about the subject, going on Twitter and saying, guys, look, I found a cool PlayStation device. That's definitely part of it, but the reality of it is a dashboard. It's a giant, who knows Jira? Who's my fellow Jira haters? Oh, yes, this is a giant, we have a supermassive Jira database of every game that we have yet to work on, have worked on, have touched. It's basically how we track our progress. I have redacted most of it, naturally, because of course you want to know what I'm working on. I mentioned earlier, I cannot tell you what I'm working on, so I have redacted like half of this. In the top left though, you can't really see it. There's a number there for total number of preservations. This is just the number of games we have currently logged in our database. That is 1,665. Is that the complete list ever? We're still working on expanding the list. That is our starting number. We break it down by console, all of the titles. Underneath that, we have the work assigned to each title, how to preserve it, things like that. This is the planning side of things. This is the reality of planning in the industry. It's really dry, it's just dashboards. I do want to point out a couple things though. Preservation tier. We like to try to gamify preservation a bit, but we also try to figure out how do you rank how preserved a title actually is. And so we sort of have abused the PlayStation trophy system, and so we ranked it bronze through platinum. And so there was a conversation at work where somebody jokingly said, like, you should have like an internal award show called like the Prezzies, and like hand out trophies to the people who preserve the games the best. And I was like, yes. But the preservation tier is effectively if you look back at the asset categorization chart I showed from earlier, we use that chart based on how many of those categories we found to evaluate how complete it is. And so if we've gotten almost every single item on the list, if not all of it, platinum grade archive. Beautiful, maximum value to the business, wonderful. If it's bronze, we probably have only found builds for it. And again, just because it's bronze doesn't mean it can never be silver or gold or platinum. It's just the current ranking for it. We have a saying we use at work, archive is never truly done, because you never know if you're gonna find a new thing or not. Archives can't be finished because games were never measured to begin with. Nobody knows the completeness of a game. It's impossible to know that. And so this is our best attempt at doing so. Secondly, final builds. There's a reason I'm putting this out. Final builds, like I said earlier, hard requirement. We preserve anything the consumer has ever seen, minimum. And then we get to preserve the fun stuff that they haven't seen. Final builds, there's a thought experiment done at work. So my department, PlayStation IP Preservation, is based out of PlayStation QA. And so we see the builds that come into QA from every company that is either a part of PlayStation Studios or that just gets published by us. We see thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of builds. Think about it. We have discs from the last 30 years, still in our department, still in boxes. So we did a thought experiment. Well, these builds probably don't exist elsewhere. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. If we were to just take somebody, gave them a desk and said, for the rest of your life, you're gonna sit here scanning disks in to get us those builds back. How long do you think it took? What our estimate came to be? 7 years. That's how many disks we currently have. That's only the disks in one office. So that's not gonna happen. We're not gonna do that. So what we decided to do, and this is a part of the engagement factor, we reached out to the people in the business and said, hey guys, we have this problem, how do you want to fix it? And so we decided to build a robot. Because I mean, that's what you do if you're Lex Luthor. So we built a robot. So this is our lovingly fourth member of the team named Voltron. I love it every time I say it. This is our lovable little guy. Some of you may recognize this device. This is a disk burning robot. One of our colleagues, who is effectively Lex Luthor, he was like, give me a day. And on a random Thursday, he just disappeared into a closet and came out and he's like, I actually reverse engineered this robot to now, very Lex Luthor. And now it actually reads in disks now. And so what we have with some modifications is we have a robot that, given a spindle of disks, takes it, reads it, puts it into another spindle, rinse and repeats, ad infinitum. That's what it does, that's all it does. And so that human factor that costed us 7 years of effort, through working with others and speaking to other people in the business, we found a solution that just runs every day for the rest of the time. That's the kind of stuff we can get up to if we have the hardware, we can fiddle with it, we have the time, the money. Yeah, we have Voltron. And also, for my engineers in the room who might be wondering, can I play Doom? Yes, I can play Doom. So that's Voltron. That's something that came to fruition because we just talked to each other, we engaged. But there's other ways of engagement. That's all internal only, but there's other things we can do and other things that we've had the privilege to do. This is the fun stuff. We have an internal Slack channel where anybody at PlayStation can come and join. It's complete open access. And we just post random stuff. We celebrate other successes in the industry. We celebrate whenever like GOG, for example, GOG. every time they do something, basically, we just repost it in there because we're excited for them. But we also post internal things we find. Some of you may recognize this machine. This is a PS2 dev kit. There's one of 2 versions made. This is the Performance Analyzer version. The retail cost was about $20,000 at the time. The R&D department, who has been good friends of ours, they have given us a countless number of weird devices they have. This is one of the devices. They're like, hey, you guys want to see what we found? What do you mean? Where is it? What? That feels like most of what R&D has is just stuff they found. So yeah, they just had this. They sent us some photos, and I said, can I post this? I think people at PlayStation would love to see it. And it spawned a thread where people who actually used it back when it was still around were like, oh, I remember the good story. I remember those days, and they just kind of gave stories of it. And so there's a huge benefit to being able to share this stuff. And actually, I do post about it on social media sometimes, usually only once in a blue moon. But yeah, if you follow me on social media, you'll probably have seen a few things that I had posted. Story time. I got to work on the Twisted Metal series. I didn't go into games thinking I'd work on a television series. It feels like it's a bit of I'm doing it a poor service. I kind of worked on it, a little bit. Basically, they wanted some audio assets for usage in the show, and they were like, yeah, we'll get you some stuff. And what I did is I made this presentation internally after the whole thing was done, and I went to all of PlayStation QA and I said, normally you see presentations that are like about business, about ROI. And I said, no, we're doing story time. I'm literally just gonna tell you a story. That's all I'm gonna do. Because this is history. History is often just stories. And I made a whole presentation just telling them everything that happened. And it was an incredible experience. That's the kind of thing we try to do. So, I also roasted PlayStation earlier this year. We finally had the privilege after years of effort where we've been able to give public presentations, actually go on stages. This was at GDC earlier this year. And one of my first slides was like, all right guys, let's roast PlayStation here, let's be honest. That's the allowances we have because again, it's a dry subject. The least we can do is try to have fun with it. This is engagement, this is planning. So, I've said a lot of things. I've given you a bit of insight as to what my job might look like. It's a lot of dashboards, a lot of custom tools, a lot of memeing online, things like that. But look, you're here because you're curious. What does actual job prospects look like in the games industry? I mean, I could just be like, trust me, bro, and then walk out. You're probably gonna hate me for that. And so I wanna give you some examples. I wanna give you some advice from a career perspective. Remember I mentioned there was jobs at Xbox earlier that got posted and nobody saw? That's them. They're no longer accepting applications, but I do want to go through them and just point out some things that you can keep in mind as you go along your career, as you go towards the future, what you might want to study, things you might want to keep in mind. These are still online, you can go and find them. There is, I believe, 9 of them. And so I'm only going to show you one of them. So some examples of responsibilities. Identify and outline the specific requirements and technical boundaries for preserving game content. You can't just be like, I'm gonna preserve a game. That's not enough, because businesses need to use these archives. They need to know what they're capable of. A lot goes into being able to play a game again. And so you need to be the expert in what that actually means to figure that out. What does it mean to play a game again, to produce new builds, to spin a title up again? It's not just server build, game build, end of the conversation, right? May involve any aspect of the application stack, from title code to the operating system to the underlying hardware itself. This is why I would suck at this job. I'm not that good. I don't know how operating systems work under the hood. I'm more of like a software guy. And so if you're somebody who's really good at this kind of stuff, you really do understand the whole 9 yards of the conversation, yeah, there's a job for you. And lastly, this will require working with limited access to debugging symbols and source code. Yeah. This is why a lot of these positions don't hire for junior staff typically, is because we don't know either. We don't know what a game has. We don't know if a game even has all the pieces available to it. Usually we're just like, here's a box, man, figure it out. We can't really trust anybody with that other than folks who probably have gone through the ringer a bit. And so it's the unfortunate reality of getting these kind of jobs. Let's talk about the requirements though. What are they actually asking for? And one that I am fervently a hater of is any time it mentions asking for a degree. This is a humongous misnomer in games. I'm not gonna say all companies do this, but most companies that in my experience who ask for a bachelor's degree don't actually require a bachelor's degree. They
That's
just
why
say
it says or equivalent experience.
Yes,
It
exactly.
always says that.
They always say or equivalent experience, and that's the thing you need to focus on. If you have the time invested, you have the projects to show, they will take that. Sometimes some companies can be more particular than others. For example, I don't have a degree. I studied game design. I hated programming originally, and now I'm here. So you don't really need to have that background. It's just they try to help guide people. We do want somebody who knows their fundamentals. Experience with software debugging, reverse engineering, and emulation/virtualization. For example, I'm an expert in virtualization to a degree. I know nothing about emulation. This is a job example of a role that specifically does emulation work. It does exist. They are in the industry. Not every group does it, but some companies do. And so if you know how to emulate stuff, you've written your own emulator, you're solid. Experience using low-level debuggers such as WinDBG, GBD, LDB. Guys, I know, I get it. We love our acronyms. We're awful for it. We don't know what they mean either. We just say them. I don't know what these software are. I don't do emulation. However, if you're interested in doing this kind of job, you're like, I love emulation. There's your homework. There's your checklist. Go and learn these software. Learn competing software, and eventually you'll get to that point where you could probably apply for this kind of job. So that's an example position that literally exists. It's out there, at least it was, but it gives you a North Star to look for. Now, at PlayStation Studios, got a question.
That's my job.
Is that your job?
Yes, I'm the one who took the job.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, small world, huh?
WinDebug can you use a Visual Studio debugger?
Doesn't-
That's what it means. If you're in Visual Studio, you use the debugger, that's WinDBG.
I feel like there's some days where I'm like, can we just call it Visual Studio Win Debugger? No.
Absolutely not.
So,
And GDB is what you use on the PlayStation.
I feel like I should know that.
I'm a Switch, PlayStation, Xbox programmer, so I
And this is why you got the job.
Yeah, and I've created Make projects, which allows you to create Visual Studio projects for Visual Studio 2003 to modern day, Xcode, modern day, even Wacom, and I reverse engineered so many games, it's not funny.
All right, everyone, write that down. Quickly, write it down. Get your notebooks out.
My advice is to join a team that does reverse engineering of the game. There's numerous ones on GitHub. That will give you the experience you need.
100%, I agree with that. Yeah, there's a lot of GitHub repos out there where people just contribute. For those of you not familiar with GitHub, GitHub is basically a platform where people can host projects and they can submit changes to it, but allows collaboration. People can submit changes to it collectively, they can review, they can diff each other's changes, things like that. There's lots of communities out there where people just have public repos they just submit their changes to. It might be a little hard to get into, but if you get that stuff on your resume, that goes a long way, because there's just not a lot of people who do this work. And so we're looking for people who have those talents that we can't find that often. One thing I will say, I had the privilege of actually visiting Microsoft a few days ago, and I spoke to their game on the Xbox and the Microsoft Archive teams, and we were just kind of chatting about this position, chatting about other kind of concepts. And one thing they said is that when you go into game preservation, and there's a point that I agree on fervently, you are going to be preserving all kinds of games. If you're going in with like, I want to preserve Legends of Dragoon, that's it, only that, everything else sucks, you're not going to get the job. You're going to be working on stuff you hate, stuff you love, stuff you've never heard of. Love the game, love the craft, love all of games. Don't just hyperfixate on one that you want to work on. It will come off in the interview poorly. If I may offer one piece of unsolicited advice. All right, so that's Microsoft. I want to give you stuff. You wanted to join PlayStation Studios, what would I look for? So, like I said, I'm a build engineer. If I wanted to hire another build engineer, which we may be doing in the next year or two, what would I look for? I kind of view our role as, Clank. We are a toolbox of capabilities. We are not necessarily masters of things, but we have an answer to most problems. So, you'll be the kind of person to work with studios to understand their workflows, technologies, and infrastructure. I don't necessarily need to be a master of their work, but I should probably understand it. Again, you're trying to aim to be another developer. That's the intimacy you should have with the title. And so when we work with games from InSong, games with SMS, things like that, Sony Santa Monica, I know their infrastructure pretty well. I know their studios very well. I've spoken to their staff. I've asked them, teach me your games. Teach me the way you build these things. And that's how I became a build engineer. Utilize SIE hard infrastructure to set up fully operational build systems for title archives. Again, it's in the name. We care about how we can produce new patches, new releases. Can we reproduce a version of the game that came out previously? These capabilities are intrinsic to our role. And so the more capable you are, the more familiar you are. Like if you ever heard of Jenkins and you're like, ah, yes, I hate it. You're a build engineer. That's all you need to know. So what I'm gonna ask, experience with Jenkins. You may hate it, you're still gonna use it. TeamCity or equivalent CI/CD software and tools. These are the core software. TeamCity and Jenkins are the most popular. I use it literally every day. These are like my lifeblood. If you're good at these, you already have a leg up because guess what? These aren't taught in school, to my knowledge. I've never heard of a program that teaches Jenkins. Maybe in a random side course nobody talks about, but nobody teaches it, and so you already have a leg up if you know it. The same thing goes for Perforce, but Perforce, Git, and other SCM or source control management tools. These are the software that all studios store their game code in, their game art in. All the material typically lives, asterisk, in these software. Git is the most common one because it's free. For anybody who works in games, you'll probably know why we don't use Git. Every game company that I know, except for one, uses Perforce. All of them. No company there's only one company in PlayStation Studios who uses Git for their game. Sorry, for the game code and game data and all of that, I should clarify. And so if you can become a master of Perforce, which is not taught in school, you already have a leg up. I personally I've been an administrator for Perforce before. I know how to spin an instance up, archive it, things like that. That is this experience you really, really, really want to have. Other SEM tools, Subversion, things like that, they're all good to have as well. Again, the more software you know, the better you are. And then naturally, the obvious one, you know game engines like the back of your hand. I was an authorized trainer of Unreal for a number of years. I used to teach game development in college. I know Unreal quite well. I work on it professionally and have my entire career. Unity, I suck at. I can operate it. I'm not great at it though. Godot, never even touched. But nonetheless, I would like to learn it. It's something that I want to put on my list of things to do. You just want to learn a lot of game software. But that's a build engineer. But what if you don't like tech? What if you don't really care to be an engineer? We actually do have a role that has nothing to do with engineering. Welcome to being the curator. The curator role is really the hero role. I can't respect my colleague enough for being a curator. The work that he does, he's the person who goes out and finds it all. He's the collector. For anybody who's ever played a Ratchet & Clank game, this is the guy who platinums it over and over again. As a curator, you're the one who manages, organizes, and reoccurringly audits, if I knew how to spell reoccurringly apparently, audits title archives within the PlayStation Studios vault. You're the gatekeeper, you're the person who owns it all. This is you, this is your stuff. You're the master of data. How we organize it, how we label it, where it goes, where it lives, where it moves to, this is your wheelhouse. Utilize third-party and proprietary tools to ensure file and metadata integrity. If I gave you two files and said, tell me if they're the same, what process would you follow to ensure that they are the same? And I'm going to ask you, again, give me 3 different ways to know whether a file is the same. This is the kind of integrity check we need in the archiving world, because inevitably we're going to have duplicates, multiple copies of things, and when it comes to things the consumer saw, there are legal complications if you don't have the right data. If you're missing a build and the consumer says they saw something in it that was offensive, and now legal needs that build and you don't have it, you'll be checking eBay, and nobody wants to be checking eBay. So requirements, what I'm actually going to ask of you. Experience working with large volumes of data, particularly within a file system. It really doesn't matter to us. You can store in any format, any data system you want, but get it into a big number. Work with millions of files if you can. Small indie games are typically tens of thousands of files. No hate to indie whatsoever. But when it comes to working in a professional space like this, again, 800 million. The scale is much different, the complications are much different. The amount of time it takes to move things. You want to know what the record is for how long it's taken to move 2 terabytes of data? 46 days.
Wow.
One terminal for 46 days. That's how long it took to transfer information to certain parts of the world. You need to make sure that happens properly. You make sure that the atomic transfers are happening properly. This is the thing that I need to trust you with. Experience working with databases. Like I showed earlier, the PlayStation Codex. That is the future. A lot of institutions have their own version of it. They're trying to build it. This is the world we need to reach to, because we can't just keep things in a box and tell nobody about it. It needs to be available. I don't know databases. I'm a build engineer. I've never really needed to know. I've never really needed to learn how to operate a database. And so I rely on my colleague to be the master of that, not me. And lastly, the only real technical thing you need to know besides the database part, a little bit of experience with PowerShell, Batch, and Bash. If you ever opened up CMD, you're already writing Batch. And so the more experience you have with this, and this is typically to like run commands like robocopy. I don't need you to like explain every exit code of robocopy and tell me everything about it. But if you know how to use it and you use it over just dragging things around in Windows Explorer, you're already off to a good start. But that's the curator role. These are examples of jobs that do exist. We will likely be hiring for a curator in the next year or so, depending on how things go. Build engineer probably a year after that. As you saw, Microsoft is hiring as well. And so these jobs are coming up. Just keep in mind what we're going to be asking for. We're going to be wanting a fair bit. Now, I want to talk about resources, because I don't want you to go away and then not be able to find anything more. There is not a lot of us talking about the subject, and so I'm going to give you some resources that I personally recommend. So, places to check out. Every one of these groups I have personally spoken to. I've spoken to staff members, I have been on Zoom calls with them, or I even visited them. I can't recommend these groups enough. Again, game industry preservation information is extremely limited. And so these are largely more of the institutions, but again, we look to them for advice. These are the experts. These are the people who know how it's done. And so I can't recommend them enough. They're in all parts of the world. I've actually been to the Strong Museum. I gave a talk there. They had a small game preservation conference last year called State of the Games. They're actually doing it again next year, theoretically. So if you're interested in flying to New York, it's in Rochester, New York. It's a great event, small group, all about game preservation. It's a really cool time. Yeah, can't recommend enough. Great resources for all of us. And lastly, industry resources. This is a very awkward slide for me, because these are just more things that I've spoken about. I wish there was more people. I wish there were more voices out there. I wish more companies would be talking about the subject. But again, like I said, we're all restricted in a variety of ways. So prior talks that I've given, well, like I said, earlier this year, I gave a talk at GDC where I just spoke about, it's kind of a more in-depth version of this presentation. It was very much tailored to what exactly are we doing at PlayStation Studios? What are our tools? What are the capabilities? I gave specifics as to like what kind of data we had. It's totally free online. You do not need an account or anything. You can just find it in the vault for free. If you want to really deep dive, years ago, in 2019, I gave a talk when I used to do preservation engineering at Electronic Arts, where I just spoke about, I mean, we're talking like beat by beat what the process looks like as an engineer. And so if you want to know kind of more of a granular way of looking at it, or specifically how EA did it, it's another resource. I mean, that's it. There's not a lot of resources out there. When we have folks from universities reach out to us and they're like, hey, like, can you refer to us to any other groups? I can't, because there aren't really anybody talking about it. I mean, there's got to be a reason. You know, there's got to be something, a reason why I can't. Yeah, we live under NDAs. That's my entire life. That's why I can't say like 90% of what I do. But I hope this was enough, and I hope that was enough, and I'm extremely excited one day to welcome some of you into this field. That's it. Looking at the giant red number, I think we have a bit of time for Q&A, I believe. Is that right? All right, microphone, I suppose, is right there. If you want to ask me any questions, I will try to answer whatever you like. Hello.
You spoke about there has to be an ROI for it. What is the ROI that you're talking about that convinces them to go back and preserve a game that's 15, 20 years old? Like, why would Sony or Microsoft or any other company say, yeah, I care about the original Twisted Metal from 20 years ago? What value does that give them?
Fantastic question. And I'll reiterate the question just for everybody who can hear it. How do you actually calculate an ROI, especially for games that are 15, 20 years old, such as, let's say, Bring It Back Twisted Metal, to convince the business owners that, hey, we can actually invest in this. Is that a fair summary? So, a long time ago, there's a Blade Runner, an attempt at remastering Blade Runner. And this is one of the stories that we shared internally when the team was built. Blade Runner, they attempted to remaster it, the game was gone, lost to time, doesn't exist. And so they were like, hey, how much would it cost to remake it? And I believe the number, don't quote me on this exactly, it was about 50 million or something like that. And it was like dead in the water, title's done. Just straight up, it doesn't happen. We're talking about millions of dollars to do things. We gathered a series of titles. I say my boss did this before I joined the team. And they did a three-year pilot program where they said, let's gather as many examples of this as possible where like the cost and figures that were given publicly are just so astronomical that it just canceled projects. And eventually it was like, this is quite compelling, but let's start with something. Let's trial this idea. And so we took a project and we started to work on the preservation of it. And we were able to see that, hey, the value proposition using these real world examples is actually pretty good. Some other examples for you as well is we've been doing an exercise recently where we look at anytime somebody has assets for something. They've asked us for audio assets for Twisted Metal, for example. We asked the audio folks, if you had to remake this yourself, or if you didn't have access to this, how much would that cost you? In time, effort, looking around for it, calculate the number of hours, multiply it by your salaries, that's the number. We have 12 of those requests a month, there's your dollar amount. And if you can make more than that, great. Or it's like, if you can reduce that number to like basically nothing because you can give stuff back in 2 minutes, well, we just saved the business money. And so it is meticulous. We are looking for every little example, publicly or internally, we can find. To give you one last fun piece of trivia, I'm not gonna tell you the game because bad things happen. There is a series of drives. The only drive known to contain this project's source information, their source art, their source code, etc. We did not write down the password.
Oh no.
That game is unrecoverable. We've tried. We put months of effort trying to get it back. We can't get it back. We just lost not only the multiple months of trying to get the data back, we have just straight lost the ability to remaster the game because it's gone. We don't have access to it. That is the cost savings. If we didn't do that, which we don't do it now, it'd be like 2 hours of my time to give you the data back. Hopefully that is enough answer for you. Thank you.
Effort is taken to preserve game developer chat logs, metadata around the game that may be helpful in the future, but definitely not immediately helpful. Maybe just interesting.
I can't comment on what Mastodon is. It is a very secret thing. In terms of game chat logs, so our policy internally is we preserve everything. And we preserve it because we don't like to be the arbiters as to what matters. We just take everything we can get. There have been cases where, chat logs can tend to enter the territory of GDPR issues. If anybody here knows what GDPR is, you know where I'm going with this. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation, and it's a policy in Europe, I think just Europe right now, that prevents user-identifiable information from being archived on business systems. There was a time many moons ago, and sorry to kind of derail this a bit, where when I worked at EA, legal was so concerned when GDPR picked up, where they actually seriously asked the archiving department, can you delete the entirety of the vault? Because it is better to delete it all rather than dealing with what might come from GDPR. We said no, and the conversation died, thankfully, but that is a serious concern of GDPR. And so whenever we're talking about storing user information, conversation with legal immediately. We're like, you guys tell us what we can and can't preserve. There have been cases where we have pulled for projects tens of terabytes of user-generated content. For certain games where you can make things online, we have it all still. We record that because it's cool and it's interesting history. Whether it be chat logs specifically, I'm not sure at this moment as to whether we preserve them. It's not on our checklist, but I'm happy to add that because I think that's really cool.
You kind of sort of answered the question I was gonna ask, but I'll ask it anyway, because it's kind of more curator related, but have you ever run into an ethical disagreement art-wise on what should be curated as lost media or what should be archived versus what shouldn't, and what a creator's intent was versus things they would not want to be archived?
We've never had an incident where a creator has asked us not to archive something. And so the answer is probably, I just don't know. I haven't had experience with it. We have historically just taken everything. And so if they have it and they don't want us to have it, we haven't been informed of it yet. And so you'll hear this policy with museums often, we'll take it until a legal issue comes up. Because it's better to have it and somebody challenge it than nobody has it, and maybe they didn't care in the first place. And so yeah, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we take everything, and so far nobody has disputed it, nobody has been uncomfortable with it, but we usually ask the studios, like, first and foremost, what do you want us to archive? If there's things like legal documents, legal contracts, that's an HR question. If they feel uncomfortable with us having it, cool, we won't take it. So yeah, sorry, the answer is not, unfortunately not, it's interesting. Hello?
So it seems like a lot of the talk that you've been doing and a lot of the work it seems basically it's kind of after the fact and retro, like fixing, not really fixing, but like doing it work. But like I was wondering, before the whole process, like is there a move or shift for, well, the actual developers who are working on the game to start like archiving, doing the work to archive themselves, and then kind of giving you stuff? Like is the industry moving towards that or not really?
Yes, and I have some examples, again, I wish I could say specifically, but we had actually an incident with the studio where we started talking about preservation. We said, let's do it. We'll trial for a project with you. I'll go in, I'll do the work, we'll get it preserved. We'll kind of address, see how we like it. Do you want to use us moving forward? Do you guys want to do it yourselves? Studios have full autonomy. If they ultimately want to kind of do their own thing, they don't really want to use us, that's okay. We do not want to intrude on the creative liberties that studios have. And after we did this first cycle, we had this archive, we came back a year later, and they're like, oh, we've actually like totally overhauled our processes now. We have actually enhanced the way we preserve things. We keep way more copies of the game, we keep single thing we do. We're still gonna give you guys full access, you can take whatever you want, but like, we wanna keep our own copy. And we're like, heck yeah, man, do it. Like, that's what we're here for. And so some studios have been inspired to improve themselves based on conversations with us. Other studios as well, yes, you are 1,000% correct. Historically, our teams always come in too late. We always come in after the fact. And that's usually when most stuff gets lost. We are making an effort, and we have done it for a few titles now that are live service, where we've like, as a game's being developed, we're like, hey, teach us about this, let us kind of be in the room a little, be in a fly on the wall, join some calls, and learn as you guys are developing that. And they have been extremely receptive to it. So far, we've had nobody upset at it, dissent about it. They have actually welcomed us aboard the project to help kind of trickle in the material, as long as we're not being intrusive. And yeah, cool, thank you. I think we have about maybe one more question. Actually, two more, yeah, probably one more question, unfortunately, about that, yeah.
Hi, yeah, that was a great talk.
Appreciate it.
My question is kind of similar to previous one. I was just curious about, like, as a game developer, what can I do to make your life easier down the line, even in a small scope on a day-to-day basis?
An incredibly important question, and it speaks to something that I want everybody here to recognize. Just because a game preservation team doesn't exist at a studio doesn't mean you can't make it. Doesn't mean you can't be the one to create the change that makes the company adopt the practices. When I left Skybox Labs, one of the studios that I worked for, they were like, hey, you did preservation. Could you write us a how-to document, how to preserve games so that we can do this when you leave? That's the kind of change you can create just by doing this work. And so, sorry, I kind of went on tangent, forgot your question.
What can I do
Yes.
on my day-to-day work to make your life easier down the line?
Figure out where everything lives and make it known. Documentation often goes out of date in the industry. We are heinously known for terrible documentation. And so if you can write this stuff down, figure out where it all goes, don't let stuff exist on thumb drives, don't let stuff exist on drives, let things be somewhere centralized, somewhere organized, and have a document pointing to where it all lives. Because if you can just give me that, my job's like half done. I can't tell you how many times I've had to ask people and they're like, yeah, this is probably all the stuff. It's not all the stuff, it's the farthest thing from it. So yeah, just help us find things.
Makes sense.
I appreciate it. And I think that's all the time we have. Thank you once again, and yeah.